Hello my beautiful watchers and welcome to the second half of my review of 50 Shades Freed. If you've not yet experienced the first half, there's the thing. Always better to start at the beginning, unless we're talking about reading these books, in which case it's much better to start at the never. Just a reminder that the subject of abusive relationships is a common theme in these reviews, so viewer discretion is advised. Okay, let's get this over with. Gray remains determined to take all of Anna's accomplishments away from her, repackage them, and then return them to her as his gift. He either genuinely doesn't understand that him buying her a company to run like a father buying his daughter a Barbie dream house isn't the same thing as her being successful in her field, or he cares more about the good feelings it will give him to achieve her dreams for her than he cares about her lifelong ambitions. That whole thing about them arguing about her running the company is also super telling about how little he actually cares about her happiness. For starters, he should have fucking asked her if she wanted to run the company before arranging the whole thing and springing it on her. Then, when she says that she doesn't want to be a CEO, he's like, no, you'll be great at it. I can tell because my entrepreneur senses tell me so. I'm left yelling, motherfucker, you didn't listen to a word coming out of your wife's mouth just now. She said she didn't want to do it, not that she doubts her abilities. That said, I doubt her abilities. I'm not trying to be mean, but she has zero experience and she has the backbone of a jellyfish, and not even the stinging type, the type that just floats around in the sea until they're eaten by something. The only arguments that Gray has in favour of this, aside from claiming that he has a sixth sense for it, is that she's really into books and she read a couple of manuscripts while she was on vacation. Gosh, what a shockingly dedicated thing for the head editor of a company to do. Seeing as I'm on a roll here, in addition to not believing that Anna is qualified to run a company, I also don't believe she deserves any employment at this company whatsoever. Anna's been working at this publishing firm for, 2 months? So potentially still on probation. During this time, she's taken an extended vacation, has had 2 extremely inappropriate personal meetings on company property during company time, taken unscheduled additional days off for personal emergencies on at least 2 separate occasions, and once left work early for sex. In any other situation, her performance would be acceptable grounds for at least disciplinary action, if not outright dismissal. But despite this complete lack of professionalism, she gets promoted to head editor instead, and the book's narrative still tries to claim that this is primarily due to her own merit and not because her hubby bought the company. It really does try to justify it. Gray claims that the board of directors took a chance on Anna because they didn't want to risk hiring a new editor while the company was being bought out, but that does nothing to sell the idea that they would hand the job over to their newest and least experienced employee. Flat Earthers would have trouble buying this concept, but E.L. James expects us to. The flirting that Gray and Anna do in between their fights is painful to witness. Human eyes cannot roll hard enough to keep up with it. Anakin and Padme Skywalker would groan at the sound of it. High school sweethearts who are convinced at age 15 that they're going to marry because no one has known true love like they do would tell these two to grow the fuck up. Just so you understand the level of cringe we're talking about, they actually, without a shred of irony, pull the no you hang up, no you hang up, no you hang up routine, and that's not by far the worst of it. Anna keeps talking about what a wonderful man Gray is underneath his pretty face. What she should be saying is there might be something underneath the pretty face, and the outer layer of cold-hearted bastard, and the inner layer of jealous controlling douchebag, and the inner layer of phone-hacking stalking sociopath, and the inner layer of insecure man-baby who needs to fuck his mother. You really can't play the he's good deep down card when the more you get to know someone, the worse they appear. I deeply regret saying that Gray put his baggage aside to be supportive of Anna when her father was on death's door in the plot synopsis video, because that is definitely giving him too much credit. He still slips in some unbelievable vileness here and there. When he arrives at the hospital after getting the news, he shoots an angry look at Anna because he sees that Jose is holding her hand. Then he interrupts a doctor trying to give Anna an update on her possibly dead father to correct her use of the name Miss Steele with Mrs. Gray. That was where this irredeemable human being's priorities were. Anna's mother appears to be under the impression that Anna and Gray are very happy together, even if we buy into the narrative that James wants us to and assume that they're happy deep down underneath all the constant arguing and emotional distress, which I don't, but play along for a second, she's still demonstrably the worst mother in the universe for missing that surface level arguing and emotional distress. In fact, everyone in this book, Kate, Gray's mother, Anna's mother, Ray, Taylor, Mrs. Jones, are all equally determined to sing Gray's praises as if that's going to convince the reader he's not a monster. Half the time though, it's not even positive stuff that that they're saying. Mrs. Jones implies that she knows that Gray really loves Anna because he was frantic when he couldn't find her the morning after the pregnancy reveal. A control freak freaking out because the thing he likes to control is briefly out of his control is not a sign of love, it's just more evidence for the prosecution. One of the many ways that James tries to justify the toxic nature of Anna and Gray's marriage is by dropping this little gem of warped wisdom on us right at the end. I think you can only be truly mad at someone you really love. That is so dumb and easily disproved, I'm not quite sure why I'm even bringing it up. I guess I just don't like the implication that I really love Donald Trump. Yeah, I made it political and dated the video. Fuck you, I suffered through 50 Shades 3 times, I'll do what I want. Now, I didn't mention this in the plot synopsis video because even in a book full of pointless, boring plot twists, this was pretty fucking inconsequential, but it turns out that Eleanor's ex-husband Mr. Lincoln posted bail for Hyde to get revenge on Gray for bonking his wife 10 years before. When Gray finds out right at the end of the book, he orders a hostile takeover of Lincoln's company and has the whole thing liquidated. Nice job, Gray, I'm sure the families of the hundreds, maybe thousands of workers you just fired will take solace in the fact that you got your own back on a guy you didn't like. Real fucking hero. So in addition to realizing that flashbacks are a thing, it appears that James has also finally discovered, just in time for this last book in the trilogy, that stories do not have to encompass every second of every minute of every hour of every day of their duration. For example, there are so many sex scenes in this book it actually skips over some instead of describing them all in excruciating, boring detail. You know, like a real not thinly veiled pornography that somehow slipped its way into the mainstream book would. It's not much, but it is nice not having to listen to exactly what Anna has for breakfast every day or when Gray brushes his teeth. No, wait, she does include those things. Shite. Anyway, the point is she's finally caught up with every other writer in the world when it comes to time jumps. The problem is though, like everything else James related, it's written really, really badly. Holy cow, I'm really looking forward to the sex we're about to have. That sure was some good sex that we had that I'm referring to in the past tense because it's later now. The epilogue has a flashback in it because of course it does. James just discovered what those are and needs to milk them for all they're worth. It recounts the birth of Anna's first child and describes how they had to do an emergency cesarean to get the kid out after some complications. Amazingly, this info, dropped in at the last minute, has exactly the same effect on the plot as almost everything else in the book, i.e. nothing. It only further proves how fucked up Gray still is because he tells Anna she's going to have the next child by electrocesarean to avoid the risk and overrides her objections about having a say in her own body. Another thing I've come to loathe about these books is the implication that, if fucked just right, a woman will violently orgasm within a few minutes, as this has the potential to lead female readers to believe that there's something wrong with them if they don't, and discourage men from putting the work in, shall we say, if they don't get instantaneous results. So, the part where Gray tells Anna not to pee before sex because it will make her orgasm better. I've looked into this, and while there's no universal medical rule against it, it is considered fairly common knowledge amongst the women I spoke to about it that it is at best going to increase Anna's chances of accidentally peeing on Gray, and at worst vastly increase her chances of getting a UTI. After their wedding, Gray insists on carrying Anna over every threshold he can find, including both his homes and his private jet. He also avoids putting her down for as long as possible, walking her through the lobby of the building, up the elevator, into the penthouse, through the living room and into the kitchen. After a while, you have to wonder if this is connected to him thinking of her as his precious sex child. After his first arrest, Hyde attempts to turn things around on Anna by claiming that she tried to sexually harass him, and the police are forced to investigate. If Gray had an iota of humanity inside his soul, he would have realized at this point that his desire to never involve the police in anything, and his psychotic need to deal with people who threaten Anna himself, has left her vulnerable to exactly this sort of he said, she said counter-strike, but of course acknowledging that someone as amazing as him has fucked up never even gets close to entering his mind. As I said in the synopsis video, Anna is very pleased with herself for telling Gia the architect to keep her hands off her man, and I feel inclined to swing back around to this briefly because I really can't overstate how not empowered that was. There was no one else in this book that would have been a safer target for her jealous sniping than Gia. All this scene proves is that Anna is very comfortable comfortable with abusing having a position of power over someone else. She justifies her behavior by pretending that she's doing it because Gia keeps touching Gray playfully and he doesn't like that, but anyone with half a brain cell can tell this is some straight up bullying that she's doing to make herself feel superior. When Gray said that he was pro-gun control, I felt my world crumbling down around me because it meant that he and I agreed on something, and I can't accept that that would ever happen. Fortunately, I quickly realized that I was being stupid. Gray throwing his money and power behind state gun laws while keeping a fully loaded gun that he didn't buy or get a background check to own, doesn't have a license for, and isn't registered to him in his desk for, I assume, personal protection reasons, is an act of hypocrisy of the highest order. Gray believes that gun control, like every other law, is something that should apply to the peasants of this world, not himself. He is of course completely oblivious to his obnoxiously contradictory logic because he's a super rich businessman, so he couldn't possibly be wrong about anything. This is certainly not the only time that Gray proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that he believes that his wealth puts him so far above the law. He ignores instructions from doctors in hospitals, he obstructs detectives investigating crimes that involve him, and he constantly doesn't report other people's crimes to the police so that he can sort the matter himself. I would have loved for him to have ended up in jail at the end of the books for obstruction of justice. Maybe that can be my new headcanon ending. Chapters, in books written by authors with even the slightest hint of competence, tend to end on something dramatic or satisfying, a plot twist or a cliffhanger or something. This book's chapters tend to end on the most pointless shit imaginable. Sometimes I swear they rolled over mid-conversation without a recognizable reason for the marker. The only explanation I can think of is James forgot that chapters were a thing when she was writing it, so when it came time to convert her story into a book, she flicked through it randomly, putting her finger where she wanted the chapter divides to be. A recurring theme in this book is Gray trying to get Anna to give up on her day job and become a stay-at-home trophy wife who only leaves the apartment to go on business trips with him so he doesn't have to go without sex for a few days. He continues to push for this after saying that he was planning to make her the CEO of her own company, asking her to drop everything and fly around the world with him. So, he's either full of shit, changeable as fuck, or so dumb he doesn't see the contradiction there. Personally, I'm willing to bet it's a combination of all three. I do believe I touched upon this in the plot synopsis, but it bears repeating that Anna drops so much fury that she had every right to feel because she realizes that Gray's feeling feelings, so his actions aren't his fault. He had a hard childhood and he doesn't know how to process emotions, so even though he's a fully grown adult, he never has to be held accountable for his actions. The fact that he's been seeing a therapist for so long and isn't even aware of this, let alone trying to improve on it, is more evidence that Flynn is the world's worst psychiatrist and/or James doesn't actually know what therapy involves. I didn't think I could find something new to hate about this book, but I realized that James' description of the way that Gray treats his PTSD is actually one of the worst things in it. Like I said, Gray appears to expect his childhood trauma to excuse all of his actions and everyone and everything around him to conform to the way he needs the world to be to deal with it, but doesn't believe that he should be expected to try to work through them or even acknowledge that they affect him if he doesn't want to. That kind of stereotype, painting the mentally ill as selfish, entitled people who just aren't willing to try, is super damaging. It's a very common misconception that James is perpetuating to the best of her abilities. If everyone on the planet gave her the middle finger, that would still be less than the ideal amount of middle fingers pointing at her. Okay, as usual with these reviews, I'm losing the will to exist, so let's cover the rest of my complaints in a quickfire format. I cannot accurately describe the feeling of utter despair I experienced when the climax ended and I realized how much of the book was still to go. There may have been tears. Example 2864 of Gray's awfulness. He asks Anna's doctor when she can fuck again as she's recovering from a vicious beating. Gray didn't let Anna take any part in planning their honeymoon. This is supposedly so it would be a surprise for her, but come the fuck on. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Gray was the bridezilla in this relationship. Gray thinks that Anna is a force of nature because she occasionally whines passive-aggressively before conceding to his every demand. A real feminist, a woman who does not only not take his shit but is willing to give some back to him for being so shitty, would just blow his mind. I mean, literally, his head would explode from all the information he couldn't comprehend. It turns out that all of Gray's former submissives are in a support group together. This either means that he's emotionally damaged everyone he's ever been with, or this is another example of James thinking that BDSM is a fetish only for the psychologically unwell. When Gray finally decides that he trusts Anna enough to give her the full story of what happened with his mother and Eleanor, it's treated as a huge revelation despite the fact that none of it is new information. It wasn't lost on me that Gray wants to control every aspect of Anna's life except her birth control, which he considers exclusively her responsibility. So, on top of being an abuser, he also partakes of toxic masculinity and extreme sexism. Anna's plan for dealing with the kidnapping is stupid, bad, stupid. Not getting Gray, the dumbest man in the world to ever believe that he was smart, is logical, but not calling the cops is always a guaranteed method of making sure that you and or others are going to end up dead. I'm guessing that James felt she hadn't given real dominance heart attacks for far too long, which is why she worked in Gray devaluing the sanctity of the safe word by interrogating Anna about why she used it and acting super upset and hurt because she did. Gray's hypocrisy when it comes to jealousy continues to know no bounds. He has zero patience for Anna being uncomfortable with him talking about his past lovers, or even him continuing to financially support his former submissives, but the mention of her kissing another man when she was a teenager unsettles him. The sentence, "I wake up and Christian is wrapped around me like ivy," comes back yet again. James must have been patting herself on the back for weeks after she thought of that one, considering how many times she uses it. James reveals how embarrassingly out of touch she is with people in their 20s yet again by having Kate say things like, "Let's go strike a pose," and "throw some shapes" when they go out clubbing. It's less annoying than her constant lack of understanding of technology, but it's not, good. One of the first things that Anna says during the epilogue is that the daughter inside her clearly likes sex. The sex that her mother and father are currently having. I can't even begin to describe all the ways in which I don't feel comfortable in regards to that. Anna often tells herself that certain things that Gray does are his way of apologizing, which reveals that he never actually apologizes for anything, so she has to look for imaginary gestures of contrition. I'm pretty sure that Hyde was supposed to be a there but for the grace of God go I character for Gray, but that doesn't really work in the slightest for the obvious reason that the only difference between Gray and Hyde in this book is Hyde's honesty of purpose. Random and not really important, but do you want to hear something kind of sad? Me and my brother used to say, "Good point, well made," to each other, ironically when one of us fucked up in an argument. These books have ruined that for me. The fact that Anna resorts to violence herself for no other reason than hoping it will stop Gray from being even more violent is deeply disturbing for obvious reasons. In all three of these books, newspapers keep writing articles about Seattle's most eligible bachelor, Christian Gray, and that is, quite frankly, a trope that I have just had enough of. Outside of the Batman universe, papers don't do that because no one gives a shit. Even tabloids wouldn't bother with someone as outwardly boring as Gray. I mean, what are they writing about? Rich man is single. Rich man is still single. Rich man isn't single anymore. If I've mentioned this in a previous review and forgotten, apologies, but do you want to know something interesting? While recording reviews of books, I have on occasion gotten the writer and the characters' names mixed up and had to do another take. When I've done this with 50 Shades, I have not been mixing up Anna and James. I've been mixing up James and Gray. Read into that what you will. To conclude this review, let's summarise Gray and Anna's relationship, shall we? Anna and Gray met. 5 weeks later, they got engaged. You could arguably say that they were dating for 3 of them if you use the term dating very loosely. There was 1 month in between the proposal and the marriage, and another month before the conception of their first child. During this time period, Anna was reduced to uncontrollable sobbing breakdowns on at least 6 occasions, including when Gray asked her out on a date, then demanded she stay away from him, when he spanked her for the first time and performed zero aftercare, after the breakup, when he shouted at her for letting herself get assaulted by her boss, when he ordered her to get out of her own apartment so he could spend some alone time with his insane former submissive there, and when he yelled at her for letting herself get pregnant. Also during this time period, they partook of the time-honoured breakup makeup drama. He has done things that could be legally considered physical assault, and they had more arguments than your average couple has in a lifetime. And let us not forget that 2 people from his past have tried to kill her. In short, Gray has made Anna's life a living hell. He has attacked her verbally and physically, he has manipulated her through lies, alcohol, guilt and intimidation, he has attempted to refuse her the basic human rights of freedom of movement, communication and privacy. He has taken over her job, moved her out of her home, he has tried to keep her isolated from her friends and family, picking and choosing anyone and everyone she is allowed to have contact with. He has illegally tracked her cell phone, he has stolen her car and sold it, he has independently acquired her banking information, he has stalked her across the country, he has taken photos of her without her knowledge, and he has marked her skin against her will. And James has tried to normalize all of this, to romanticize Gray as a tortured soul who can give you everything but needs to be rescued from himself, and glorify Anna as a selfless martyr who saves him with her goodness. The Dom's final thoughts. Wait, do I usually do final thoughts for these reviews? I'm doing it this time. I am actually willing to say that this book is marginally less horrible to read when compared to the first two, though that sure as fuck is not because it's better in any way. I think it's because a huge part of my pain when reading Grey and Darker was tied into the desperate hope that I couldn't let go of despite all logic that Grey and Anna wouldn't end up together. Now that they're married, there is no hope. The riptide has already swept Anna out to sea. She's so far beyond help she might as well stop swimming against it and relax a little while she drowns. I also think I was kind of numb to the horror at this point. I had to keep reminding myself to write down notes about Grey's horrible behaviour instead of just nodding my head in sad recognition that this is James's idea of romance. I don't want to make too many insinuations about E.L. James's personal life or what she must be like to write something like this, and I do regret the times that I have done so in the past because at the end of the day I don't know her and nor do I have the slightest inclination to cultivate such an acquaintance. Therefore all I am qualified to judge is the work of hers I have experienced, and I do believe I have made it quite clear that I have nothing but hatred and disgust for these books. What more is there to say that I've not covered already? They're terribly written on every conceivable level of literacy, including theme, plot, structure, characters, dialogue, development, diversity, consistency, tone, description, repetition, grammar, logic, tension, originality, and conclusion. They're rampantly sexist, they play far too fast and loose with the subject of consent, they get every conceivable aspect of BDSM wrong, they make wildly inaccurate assertions towards female bodies, and they normalize and glorify physical and emotional abuse. Thank you for joining me, my beautiful watchers. Please tune in next time for the Lost in Adaptation episode, where I will compare the film based on this piece of shit book to this piece of shit book, and finally be able to put all of this behind me and start the healing process. One final thing, I've discovered that despite YouTube advertising for 50 Shades, they inevitably demonetize and reject the appeals of any videos about 50 Shades. Sometimes it takes a week or two for them to find it, but they will do it eventually. This means that these episodes won't be making any money and won't be recommended to anyone who's not already a subscriber. Despite this, I am still going to donate what the revenue would have been to the domestic violence hotline, and if you guys would be willing to share this video around the internet, it would help compensate a lot for the lack of recommendations on YouTube, so I would greatly appreciate it. If you'd also be kind enough to do all those things that help my channel not fall into the dark pit of obscurity like commenting and giving it the old thumbs up, I would consider myself deeply in your debt. See you soon. Hello again, my beautiful watchers. I just wanted to take this opportunity to give you a quick reminder that there's a wonderful website called Patreon that's been allowing online producers to actually make a living doing what they do, since apparently YouTube's decided that they shouldn't anymore. Basically, they offer the chance to pledge a certain amount of money per month or per video in exchange for various rewards offered by the creator. There's a variety of stuff you can earn by becoming one of my patrons, including early access to all videos and taking part in that survey you see at the start of every Lost in Adaptation episode. That's actually a very important part of the process, as I use it to gauge how much I'm going to need to explain about the book and the film before I start comparing them. If you decide to become a higher level contributor, your name will be added to the credits that you're seeing right now, and you'll be given the option to join my private chat room so you can regularly talk with me and other patrons. If you're keen enough to join the topmost tier of patronage, you'll earn the most coveted of all the rewards, the chance to pick a future adaptation to be reviewed by yours truly. However, if right now you are thinking, my goodness the Dom, I can't do that, I was going to. I found a magic lamp that granted me 3 wishes, and I meant to wish for infinite wealth, but, well, long story short, I have 3 jetpacks now. Fear not, it would still be a huge help to me if you were to give that like button the old clickaroo, share this episode on social media with perhaps a little recommendation to your friends to check it out, and subscribe if you've not already. It really helps my channel grow and reach new beautiful watchers. I hope you have a most pleasant day, and I will see you in the next episode. freight train driving through my driveway, apparently. The Dom's final... Voice broke like I was a teenager there. The Dom's final thoughts. I'm gonna get big boy hair any day now. Now that they're married, there's no... That happened again. They're terribly written on every conceivable level of literacy, including theme, plot, structure. The script is on the way to the ground. They're rampantly sexist. They play... And that's 3. 4.